The night the laughter stopped. The spotlight followed Dean Martin as he strolled onto the stage, one hand in his pocket, the other lazily lifting a glass of whiskey toward the cheering crowd. The orchestra struck a playful note. The curtain lifted. The laughter began even before he opened his mouth. This was home for him. The Sands Hotel ballroom in Las Vegas was packed shoulder to shoulder. Hollywood executives, mob-connected high rollers, cocktail-dressed socialites, and tourists who had saved all year just to see Dino live. Smoke hung in the air like a velvet curtain. Every table sparkled with ice buckets and nervous anticipation. Dean flashed that crooked smile that made women melt and men wish they were him. "Well," he drawled into the microphone, "I see the bar is already doing better business than I am." Laughter rolled across the room like a warm wave. He thrived on this energy, he always had. But tonight something felt off. Not wrong, not dangerous, just heavy. Like the air before a storm. Backstage, moments before he went on, he had stared into the mirror longer than usual. He adjusted his tie twice, smoothed his hair once too many times. A strange ache pressed behind his ribs, the kind that didn't come from whiskey or exhaustion. He brushed it off. You don't survive Hollywood this long by listening to feelings. Dean launched into his opening song, his voice smooth as polished mahogany. The crowd swayed, glasses clinked. Waitresses weaved through the tables like dancers. The band was tight. The jokes landed clean. Everything was perfect. And yet something was missing. Between songs, as applause thundered, his eyes drifted toward the empty chair near the side of the stage. That chair had always meant something to him. Because years ago, in clubs far smaller than this ballroom, Marilyn Monroe used to sit there when she came to watch him perform. Always just out of the spotlight. Always pretending she didn't want attention. Always laughing louder than anyone else when he told a bad joke. Marilyn had been light. Pure light. And Dean had loved her in his own crooked, complicated way. Not the way the tabloids loved her. Not the way the world used her. But in the quiet, private way two broken people sometimes recognize each other without ever saying it out loud. He hadn't spoken to her in months. Hollywood had swallowed her again. Doctors, studios, pills, promises. He took a sip of whiskey. All right, he said, waving the crowd down. Enough applause, you're gonna ruin my reputation as a tough guy. More laughter. He started into another number, a slower one. A song about love that slips through your fingers while you're too busy pretending you don't care. His voice softened. And that's when it happened. A man in a dark suit appeared at the edge of the stage. Not a waiter, not a stagehand, not security. He stood frozen, pale, clutching a folded piece of paper like it weighed 100 pounds. Dean caught his eye mid-lyric. The man didn't move. Didn't smile. Didn't nod. He just stared. Dean's voice wavered for half a second. He finished the line. The orchestra carried him through the last note. Applause erupted again. But Dean didn't bow. Didn't grin. Didn't wink. He stepped toward the edge of the stage instead. "What's wrong?" he muttered, barely moving his lips. The man swallowed hard. "Mr. Martin, I'm so sorry to interrupt." Dean felt that pressure in his chest tighten. "You better have a good reason," he whispered. The man held out the paper with shaking hands. Dean unfolded it. It was only 2 lines long. 2 lines that shattered everything. Marilyn Monroe was found dead this morning. Los Angeles police confirmed it 1 hour ago. The room didn't spin. The lights didn't blur. The music didn't stop. The audience kept laughing at a joke the bandleader had made to cover the silence. But something inside Dean Martin cracked open so violently, it felt like his ribs might collapse inward. He read it again. And again. And again. "No," he whispered. The man leaned closer. "Sir, I didn't know how else to." Dean waved him away. His hands were shaking. Not trembling. Shaking. The kind that comes from shock, so deep your body doesn't know how to react. He turned slowly back toward the microphone. The orchestra was already starting the intro for the next song. Dean raised a hand. They stopped. The crowd quieted. 1,000 eyes locked onto his face. He stared at them like he didn't recognize a single one. "Well," he said hoarsely, forcing a crooked half-smile, "looks like you folks finally bored me into forgetting the words." Light laughter rippled through the room. He swallowed hard. I'm gonna take a short break." Someone shouted, "We love you, Dean." He nodded once, then stepped off stage. The curtain fell, and the moment it closed, he collapsed into a chair like his legs had been cut out from under him. He pressed the paper against his chest. Marilyn, dead. The word didn't make sense. Not for someone who burned as bright as she did. Not for someone who survived everything the world threw at her. Not for someone who once whispered to him backstage, "Dino, promise me you won't disappear when things get ugly." He squeezed his eyes shut. A memory hit him so hard it stole his breath. Flashback Hollywood years earlier. Marilyn stood in his dressing room doorway, barefoot, wearing one of his oversized jackets. "You're impossible," she said, smiling. Dean leaned against the vanity, "And you're trouble." She stepped closer. "Say something nice to me," she teased. "You steal my jackets." She laughed. "I mean it." He studied her face. No makeup, no studio lights, no cameras. "Just Norma Jean." "You're stronger than anyone in this town," he said quietly. Her smile faded just a little. "Liar." He reached out and squeezed her hand. "You don't get to tell me what I see." For a moment, she looked like she might cry. Then she pulled away and put her movie star smile back on. "Sing me something sad tonight," she said. "I need it." Back to the present. Dean Martin opened his eyes. His throat burned. The show manager rushed in. "Dean, what happened? We can cover." "Cancel it," Dean said flatly. "What?" The crowd. "Cancel it." The manager froze. Dean stood up, swaying slightly. "I'm done for the night." "Dean, you can't just." "I just did." He walked past him. Past the band. Past the stagehands. Past the curtain that still hid the confused, restless audience. He didn't look back. Outside, the desert air hit his face like ice. He leaned against the wall and slid down until he was sitting on the pavement. For the first time in decades, Dean Martin cried. Not quiet tears. Not controlled tears. He sobbed like a man who had just realized he waited too long to say everything that mattered. The letter she never sent. Dean Martin didn't remember how he got back to his hotel suite. He only remembered the silence. Not the comfortable late-night kind. The kind that screams at you when the world has just changed forever. The door shut behind him with a soft click. The lights stayed off. The city of Las Vegas glittered outside the window like it was mocking him, thousands of tiny stars celebrating while one of the brightest souls he had ever known was gone. He stood in the middle of the room for a long time. Still in his tux. Still clutching the crumpled paper. Still not breathing right. "Marilyn," he whispered, as if saying her name out loud might bring her back. It didn't. He poured himself a drink. Didn't taste it. He poured another. Didn't taste that either. Then his knees buckled. He sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the carpet like it might open up and swallow him whole. His phone rang. He ignored it. It rang again. Ignored. Again. Finally he snapped, "What?" It was Frank Sinatra. "Dino, I heard, I'm so sorry." Dean closed his eyes. Frank didn't joke. Didn't tease. Didn't sound tough. He sounded old. "I should have called her," Dean said quietly. "You couldn't have known," Frank replied. Dean laughed, a broken, ugly sound. "I always knew." They sat in silence on the line. Then Frank said softly, "She left something for you." Dean's heart stuttered. "What do you mean?" "Joe DiMaggio called me, said her assistant found an envelope in her apartment. Your name was on it." The room tilted. "When?" They're flying it out tomorrow. Dean dropped the phone. The next day, Los Angeles. The sky was brutally blue. Wrong for a day like this. Dean stood outside Marilyn's apartment building, surrounded by reporters, cops, and strangers who suddenly loved her now that she was gone. He felt like an intruder, like he didn't deserve to be there. A woman in a black dress approached him. Her eyes were red, her hands trembled. "Mr. Martin, I'm Lena, Marilyn's assistant." She held out a small, cream-colored envelope. "This was in her nightstand. She wrote your name on it 3 days ago." Dean stared at it. Didn't touch it. Didn't breathe. Finally, he took it. The paper was soft. Handled too many times. Opened and closed. "I'm sorry," Lena whispered. "She talked about you a lot." Dean nodded once and walked away before he broke down in front of everyone. He didn't open it until he was alone in his car. His fingers shook so badly he almost tore it. Inside was a single page. Her handwriting was messy, uneven, like she'd been crying when she wrote it. Maryls letter. "Dino, I don't know how to say this without sounding weak, so I'll just say it messy and honest. I'm tired, not the movie set tired, not the another doctor appointment tired, the tired that lives in your bones and doesn't leave. Everyone keeps telling me I'm loved, but they only love the idea of me. They don't love the girl who gets scared at night and can't sleep without the lights on. You were the only one who never tried to fix me. You just sat there and made bad jokes until I felt human again. I wanted to call you last week. I almost did. But I didn't want to be a burden again. If something happens to me and you're reading this, please don't blame yourself. You saved me more times than you know. I kept one of your jackets. It still smells like cigarettes and whiskey and safety. Sing something sad for me one last time. Love, M." Dean folded the letter and pressed it to his forehead. And something inside him finally shattered. The funeral. The church overflowed. Hollywood royalty filled every pew. Diamonds, black suits, fake tears. Dean sat in the back. He didn't want to be seen. Didn't want to be comforted. Didn't want to hear a single hollow word about how she's in a better place now. He wanted to scream. When the priest spoke about Marilyn's joyful spirit, Dean clenched his fists. Joyful? They had no idea. They didn't see her shaking hands. Her pills lined up like soldiers. Her whispering, "Don't let me disappear, Dino." When the service ended, people stood in clusters, trading memories like gossip. Dean didn't move. Joe DiMaggio walked over and sat beside him. Neither man spoke. Finally, Joe said, "She waited for you to call." Dean's chest caved in. "I know," he whispered. Joe nodded. "She kept your jacket by her bed." Dean couldn't breathe. The night he sang for her. 3 nights later, Dean went back on stage. The Sands was sold out again. Nobody knew why he had disappeared mid-show days earlier. The band waited for his usual swagger. His usual jokes. His usual careless charm. He walked out slowly. No glass. No smile. No jokes. The room fell silent. "I lost someone," he said into the mic. "My best friend." A murmur rolled through the crowd. He signaled the band. "Play I'll Be Seeing You." The first note cracked his voice. He didn't stop. By the second verse, tears were streaming down his face. He didn't wipe them away. The audience didn't clap. Didn't move. Didn't breathe. When he finished, he stood there shaking. "That one was for Marilyn," he whispered. And for the first time in his life, Dean Martin walked off a stage to total silence the night she tried to reach him. The applause never came back the same after that night. Dean Martin kept performing, but something essential had left the building with Marilyn Monroe. Every joke landed softer. Every song sounded lonelier. Every glass of whiskey got heavier. The audience still adored him, but Dean no longer recognized the man they were cheering for. The call log. 2 weeks after Marilyn's funeral, Dean was sitting alone in his Beverly Hills living room when his housekeeper, Rosa, quietly set a small box on the coffee table. "This came with the rest of her things, senor," she said softly. "Mr. DiMaggio asked me to give it to you." Dean stared at it. It was old cardboard taped shut. He didn't open it until Rosa left. Inside were personal items Marilyn had kept hidden away. A pressed flower, a lipstick-stained napkin, a photograph of them laughing backstage, and a small notepad. Dean picked up the notepad. His breath stopped. It was a phone log. Not official. Not typed. Handwritten. Dates. Times. Short notes. All from the last 2 weeks of her life. His name appeared over and over again. July 28, 11:47 p.m. Didn't answer. Try again tomorrow. July 30, 1:13 a.m. Rang 4 times, hung up. Aug 2, 12:01 a.m. Left voicemail, said I was scared. Aug 3, 2:22 a.m. Didn't pick up, don't bother him again. Aug 4, 10:59 p.m. One last try. Dean's heart slammed into his ribs. He dropped the notepad like it burned. No, 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 no. He ran to his phone, pulled open the message box, listened, and listened, and listened. One voicemail remained. He had ignored it because he was drunk that night. He pressed play. Marilyn's voice filled the room. Not glamorous, not playful, not confident, just small, just tired, just scared. "Hi, Dino, it's me. I know it's late, I'm sorry. I just needed to hear your voice for a minute. The house feels too quiet and my head won't stop. You don't have to call me back if you're busy. I just wanted to say I miss you. That's all. Okay. Good night." The line went dead. Dean collapsed onto the floor and screamed. The secret no one told him. 3 days later, Frank Sinatra showed up at Dean's house unannounced. Dean looked worse than ever. Unshaven, eyes bloodshot, hands shaking constantly. Frank took one look at him and sat down. "Dino, there's something you need to know." Dean didn't respond. She wasn't alone that night. Dean's head snapped up. "What?" There was a doctor, a studio fixer, 2 people who left before morning. Dean's pulse roared in his ears. "What are you saying?" Frank hesitated. They were trying to control the story. Keep her working, keep her quiet. She was panicking. She asked them to leave. Dean stood up too fast. "You're lying." "I wish I was." Frank handed him a folded document. It was a police note. Unofficial. Never released to the press. It said, subject was distressed, repeatedly requested to contact DM in the hours before death. Dean dropped it. The room tilted. "She tried to call me," he whispered. Frank nodded. "She was asking for you." Dean slammed his fist into the wall. Again, and again, and again. Blood ran down his knuckles. "I was on stage," he screamed. "I was telling jokes, I was pretending nothing mattered." Frank grabbed him. "Dino, stop." "She didn't want to die alone," Dean sobbed, "and I wasn't there." The spiral. From that moment on, Dean Martin stopped caring whether he lived or not. He drank before noon. Drank during interviews. Drank during rehearsals. Missed shows. Insulted producers. Fired his manager. Screamed at strangers. He stopped answering the phone. Stopped leaving the house. Stopped singing anything but sad songs. The Rat Pack noticed. They tried to help. He pushed them away. "You don't get it," he shouted one night at Sammy Davis Jr. "She asked for me and I wasn't there." Sammy grabbed his shoulders. "You can't carry this alone." Dean shoved him off. "I deserve it." The last tape. One night, months later, Dean stumbled into a pawn shop. He didn't know why he went in. Something pulled him there. Behind the counter, an old man handed him a dusty reel-to-reel tape. "Came from an estate sale," the man said. "Thought you might want it." Dean frowned. The label read, "MM Private for Dino." His breath vanished. He bought it without asking the price. At home, he set up the machine. Pressed play. Marilyn's voice filled the room again. But this time, she was singing. Softly, off-key, a song he had taught her years ago. Then she laughed. "Dino, if you're hearing this, it means I chickened out and didn't give it to you in person. I just wanted you to know you were the safest place I ever had. I hope wherever I end up, I still get to hear you sing. Don't disappear on me, okay?" The tape clicked off. Dean dropped to his knees and whispered into the empty room. "I'm here now." The decision. That night, Dean packed a suitcase. Not for a tour. Not for a movie. Not for a party. For something final. He left a note on his piano. "If I don't come back, tell them I loved her more than I ever said out loud." He got into his car and drove into the desert, not knowing if he was coming back, the song that saved his life. The desert didn't care that Dean Martin was dying inside. It didn't care that he had lost the only woman who ever saw through his fame and into his fear. It didn't care that he had driven for 6 hours straight without stopping, his eyes hollow, his hands trembling on the steering wheel. The road stretched endlessly ahead of him, empty and cruel, glowing under the moon like a ribbon leading nowhere. The gas needle dipped below empty. Dean didn't slow down. He didn't want to. He wanted the car to stop on its own. He wanted the universe to decide for him. When the engine finally coughed and died, he let it. The car rolled to a stop in the middle of nowhere. No lights. No buildings. No people. No sound but the wind. Dean stepped out. The desert air was ice cold. He laughed softly. "Fitting," he whispered. "Even the world ran out of patience with me." He sat on the hood of the car and pulled Marilyn's letter from his pocket. Read it again. Then folded it carefully and placed it over his heart. "I'm tired too, kid," he said to the stars. He looked up. For the first time since her death. He didn't feel angry. He felt empty. And that emptiness scared him more than any grief ever had. The collapse. Dean's legs gave out. He dropped to his knees in the sand. His breathing went shallow. His chest tightened. The world tilted. He clutched his heart, panic surging through him. "Not like this," he whispered. "Not alone." He collapsed face down in the sand. And everything went black. The voice. He didn't know how long he was unconscious. Minutes. Hours. Maybe longer. But he heard a voice. Soft. Familiar. Singing. Off-key. "I'll be seeing you in all the old familiar places." Dean opened his eyes. The desert was still empty. But the song kept going. "Marilyn," he croaked. The voice wasn't outside. It was inside his head. From the tape. From the memory. From the part of him that refused to die yet. He rolled onto his back, gasping for air. "I'm here now," he whispered again. He dragged himself back to the car. Opened the door. Collapsed into the driver's seat. And started singing. Not well. Not pretty. Not on key. But with everything he had left. "I'll be seeing you." His voice cracked. He kept going. "I'll find you in the morning sun." Tears streamed down his face. His chest loosened. His breathing slowed. He sang until his throat burned. Until his hands stopped shaking. Until his heart stopped racing. And when he finished, he didn't feel like dying anymore. The rescue. At dawn, a pickup truck pulled onto the road. The driver saw the stalled car. Saw the man slumped inside. Stopped. Called for help. By noon, Dean Martin was in a hospital bed. Alive. Barely. The doctor leaned over him. You had a severe panic-induced cardiac episode, he said. Another hour out there and you wouldn't be here. Dean stared at the ceiling. Guess I'm bad at quitting, he muttered. The promise. 3 days later, Dean stood alone on a small private stage. No audience. No cameras. No press. Just him, a piano, and a single spotlight. He set Marilyn's jacket on a chair in the front row. He adjusted the microphone, took a breath, and spoke to the empty room. I didn't come when you called. His voice shook. I didn't answer the phone. I didn't save you. But I'm not disappearing. He swallowed. This one's for you. He sang the saddest song he knew. Not the one the crowd loved. Not the one that sold records. The one she had asked for. Every note hurt. Every word cut. But he finished it. And when the final chord faded, he whispered, I'm still here, kid. The final years. Dean Martin never laughed the same again. But he did keep singing. He started a foundation for performers struggling with loneliness and addiction. He called people back when they left late-night messages. He kept Marilyn's jacket in his dressing room. Before every show, he touched it and whispered, Stay. He stopped pretending he was unbreakable. He let people see his sadness. And somehow, that made his music deeper. Realer, more honest. Fans said his voice sounded different after that year. Like it carried ghosts. Like it carried truth. The last note. Years later on his final tour, Dean Martin stood on stage one last time. The crowd roared. He smiled softly. Not his old swaggering grin. Something gentler. Something tired. He looked up toward the balcony. Toward the empty chair only he could see. This one's for my best friend, he said. He sang the same song, the one that saved his life. And when he finished, he whispered into the mic. I didn't disappear. The lights faded. The curtain fell. And somewhere beyond the noise of the world, it finally felt like Marilyn heard him.